can you talk a little bit about how foreign intervention has kind of become a cornerstone of the liberal project in the US, at least?
Wow. Well, I mean, as long as we're talking about bipartisanship, I mean, I think this is a really good example of it. There is, I mean, it's within the political class, although it's changed, I think, somewhat recently with the there's a larger chorus of dissent around this than there has been arguably since the 1960s or 70s in Congress because of a few of these more left-wing lawmakers have been elected. But I mean, the consensus around, I mean, foreign policy, there's probably that and the military budget, and of course the two are closely interrelated. I don't think there's anything in which there's such uniformity within the political class and within the media as well. Adam Johnson, the media critic Adam Johnson, has been curating these really, I mean, truly remarkable clips throughout the past couple of weeks. Where you see these completely, ostensibly completely neutral foreign correspondents for major networks talking in the most utterly, nakedly partisan way about. I can't remember who it was who said that. Some foreign correspondent, I believe for NBC, talking about how this was the greatest defeat for Western values in decades or something like that. This is one area where I think the American elite is quite fiercely ideological. I think that there is a belief in, people like myself, have to be careful in terms of, it can be possible, it can be too convenient, I think sometimes too seductive to simply dismiss liberals in particular as kind of, cold or diffident technocrats or something like that. And when it comes to things like foreign intervention, I think there is a genuine ideological zeal. I think Biden's own career is a testament to that. I mean, you saw how after 9/11, where of course there was, really an unprecedented uniformity from the leaderships of both parties around the war on terror, which didn't really start to change until 2004, 2005, 2006. You saw how there was a real symbiosis in the way that conservatives and liberals talked about foreign intervention. Liberals were all too happy to kind of sign on to the kind of core tenets of the war on terror, but they tended to talk about the project in more, using more kind of more liberal terms. Kind of humanitarianism, spreading democracy, things like that. And there was a convergence of liberals and neocons on those things, which after a while, in certain cases anyway, I think those two, liberals and neocons often became quite indistinguishable in the mid 2000s. But so foreign intervention and support for the American empire is something that there's tremendous uniformity around within the political class and within the media class, and there has been some time, and you can really see that in the wake of the Afghanistan withdrawal, because for the better part of, for more than a year now, liberal audiences have been served the narrative that Joe Biden is the most progressive president in history. He's there was one commentator who shall not be named who claimed that kind of left of center commentator who claimed that the Biden administration was going to represent, I believe it was the best of the FDR Johnson administrations, the best of Bernie Sanders, and the best of Obama, all together, all of those things together. So a kind of, New Deal liberalism on steroids, a choose your own adventure of kind of whatever good things for good people come into your head, right? So that narrative has existed really since Biden won the primaries. There's been a love affair with Biden that's been, I don't know if it's been unprecedented. Let's say unprecedented since the love affair with Obama in 2008 and 2009. And then that changed suddenly overnight, as Bronco put it, because Biden ended a war. and that tells you quite a lot about the uniformity that exists around foreign interventions and the American project abroad, even as liberals and conservatives tend to discuss those things with different emphases and use slightly different terms around them.
So let's also then talk a little bit about the perhaps temporary Biden love affair, because when I was looking at your articles, something that I was thinking about was that during the Trump administration, the pinnacle of liberalism was Trump derangement syndrome, what people kind of call Trump derangement syndrome, right? Like, again, as you were saying, this kind of like extreme sort of histrionic rhetoric about Trump ushering in just a terrible fascist new regime. I think that we can still see sort of strains of that. I pulled a couple quotes from a New York Times article. One of the columnists recently was talking about the Gavin Newsom's recall election, and he wrote, unless California's Democrats wake up in 3 weeks' time, a Trumpian provocateur could well be chosen to run one of the nation's bluest states. He's, of course, talking about Larry Elder. Gavin Newsom himself commented in that same article and said, "Some say," meaning Elder, "he's the most Trump of the candidates. I say he's even more extreme than Trump in many respects." So I guess my question for you is, are liberals' brains permanently broken? Or maybe more diplomatic way of asking the question is, how would you characterize liberalism in the post-Trump transitioning to Biden era?
Well, I do think that I think the Trump era really hardened particular reflexes and kind of solidified particular reflexes among liberal commentators and liberal audiences. So, I mean, I think this stuff, and for some of the reasons that I mentioned before, the kind of incentive structures in the media in particular, this sort of stuff is going to be, I think unless there's a structural transformation of American liberalism and of kind of the Democratic coalition, which, for the next few years, at least, I'm certainly not holding my breath. I don't think these reflexes are going to change. And if anything, they're probably going to harden further. I mean, that right there, what you just quoted, which I had not seen and is incredibly funny, is, I mean, that is the beginning. I mean, it's been a joke on the left for years, as people like George Bush have been kind of normalized and even celebrated. They're going to do the same thing with Trump. That right there seems very much to be opening up space for doing exactly that kind of thing, where first it's going to be that such and such a person is even more extreme than Trump. And, 10 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised if, we're going to learn all about how Donald Trump may have had his flaws, but at the end of the day, he was a patriot who loved his country and, wanted the best for everyone or something like that. But I think that to take kind of a longer view of this, I think that it goes back, I'm being obviously quite general here, but I think that this impulse and this type of rhetoric really does go back to the end of kind of the New Deal Democratic coalition, the rejection of Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition, and the embrace of the Clintonite embrace of neoliberalism, basically. That project has really left the Democrats in a bit of a bind, because there are all these things that ostensibly they need to be for, and which structurally they're not really willing or able to do. If you're a Democratic politician, you can't really come out and say, well, we're not doing this stuff because we fundamentally don't believe in it. I mean, every so often, I think particularly in the wake of the two Sanders challenges, 2016 and 2020, they did occasionally say things like that. There was the very revealing moment where Hillary Clinton in 2016, where she called, Medicare for all some theoretical idea that's never ever going to come to pass. So you do get a few moments like that. But basically, in the face of this ideological retreat, which a lot of liberal commentators and pundits and leaders, I think, as well, and the liberal intelligentsia broadly, they're not really willing to discuss it in those terms. They don't want there to have been an ideological retreat. It's not something they're really willing to concede. And so you have to have something to fill the void. And so I think there's a whole kind of, alternate explanation that's proffered, where really, the liberal ontology of politics has really been, I think, since the 1990s, the early 2000s, depending on where you date it, it's really been, well, we could have all these nice things, but if it wasn't for the right, which is so dangerous that you absolutely must vote for the Democrats, you must be an enthusiastic supporter of absolutely whatever the Democrats do, whether they're in power, whether they're out of power. If they're in power, you have to support them and not criticize them publicly because they need to maintain that power to mitigate this looming threat. And if they're out of power, you have to do the same thing so that you can eliminate the threat and get it out of power. So I think that's kind of the longer explanation for this, is that there's been this great ideological retreat on the part of liberals, but that's not something that most of them are willing to concede, except in a few select moments. And so there has to be some alternate, explanation offered to voters, and that's usually the one that they that they go with. There's a whole kind of cottage industry, and has been for a long time, around blaming Fox News for absolutely everything. Obviously Fox News is a negative influence, to put it mildly, in American life, but I don't think it's to blame for absolutely everything that's wrong in American politics. And I certainly think it has very little to do with the Democratic Party's own shift to the right, which at times has been very zealous and enthusiastic.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's always the excuse of, these moderate voters who are still Democrats, we can't go too far, they won't be. And it's like, well, maybe these voters have been molded by what you've been doing the last 30 and 40 years. I mean, maybe they're responding to the message that there's no alternative and this is all you can do. So you've created this problem and then use it as an excuse to not get out of the problem.
That's right. And also, I mean, that impulse, I should say, really was strengthened after 2010, I think. I think people were conditioned, liberal audiences were conditioned very strongly after the midterm wipeout in 2010 to think, well, Democrats, of course, want to do all these great things. They want to pursue a transformational and progressive project, but they can't. And the reason is because of the right. That's a much easier, psychologically, that's a much easier, if you were signed up for the Obama project in 2008, 2009, and you were excited about it, and then you didn't get, what did you get? Dodd-Frank and a healthcare reform package that had its origins in the Heritage Foundation. There's not a lot to celebrate there. It's pretty thin gruel, especially when measured against the rhetoric that Obama was using in 2008 and 2009 during the campaign in 2008 in particular. So it's much easier to say, instead of saying, well, maybe we didn't get this stuff because that's not what Obama wanted. It's not ever what he was about. It's not ever the type of legislative agenda he was trying to pursue. It's much easier to say, oh, well, we can't have nice things because of Fox News. Or Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I know you probably noticed, I have to say it for the record, we should never forget that in 2010, what the numbers show is that there was actually a decline in Democrat turnout. There was not this explosion of Republican turnout, which, I think could support the idea that if Obama would have gone bigger and bolder and really excited the base, they could have held on.
If you like this video from The Jacobin Show, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks.